I did not leave the apartment after that night, and it wasn't because I believed staying was safer. I stayed because whatever had been above me had already stopped pretending to hide. The ceiling was quiet, but the silence felt organized, like something had finished adjusting itself and no longer needed to move. I stayed awake until morning, lying flat on my back and watching the ceiling without blinking, because every time I closed my eyes, I felt the weight above me shift slightly, not enough to make a sound, but enough to be noticed. The apartment itself remained completely still, and none of the usual noises from the building returned, which made it clear that what I had been hearing before was never part of the structure settling or expanding. There were no cracks, no bending beams, and no stress sounds, which meant the ceiling was not under strain at all. And that realization felt worse than if it had been collapsing. Whatever was above me was not testing the space anymore. It was resting. When daylight finally came, I inspected the apartment carefully and slowly, looking for any visible change, any sign that the ceiling had shifted or lowered. But everything appeared exactly the same as it always had. I measured the height again, checked the walls, and even compared old photos on my phone to make sure nothing had changed overnight. And every measurement confirmed the same impossible result. There was still no space above my ceiling that could physically contain a standing body, let alone something that could move with intent and balance. That was when I understood that the problem was not vertical space, but depth. I pressed my palm against the ceiling and felt a subtle vibration that did not move outward, but inward, as if the structure itself was absorbing pressure instead of resisting it. The sensation was faint but consistent, like something embedded between layers rather than sitting on top of them. And once I noticed it, I could not ignore it anymore. The sound I had been calling footsteps was never coming from above the apartment. It was coming from inside the ceiling itself. That night, the sounds returned, but they were different from before, slower and heavier, like something no longer practicing movement, but committing to it. The pacing stopped being exploratory and became directional, following straight lines instead of wandering paths, as if whatever was inside the structure had finished learning the space. Each step caused a dull internal shift rather than an external sound, and I realized it was no longer trying to stay unnoticed. It was testing how much of itself the building could support. I felt the pressure before I heard anything else, a gradual increase that spread evenly across the ceiling rather than focusing on a single point. The light fixture swayed slightly without any air movement, and fine dust began falling in a steady pattern that suggested controlled weight rather than collapse. At that moment, I understood that it wasn't trying to come down violently. It was lowering itself carefully. The movement stopped completely, At exactly the same moment, my breathing did, and the silence that followed felt intentional rather than empty. Nothing broke, nothing cracked, and nothing gave way, which meant the structure had accepted the weight fully. Whatever had been above me was no longer above me at all. It was now part of the ceiling. The footsteps never returned after that night. Now, when I lie in bed, I don't hear movement anymore. I feel alignment, as if something finally reached the level it was always meant to occupy.